My name is Alpha Hayes. I am 64 years old, a widow, and for the last 17 years, I have lived a life that everyone around me believed was modest and ordinary. Most people thought I survived on my late husband's engineer pension and a carefully managed insurance policy. That was exactly what I wanted them to think. But on the day of my son's wedding, the mask I had worn so carefully was torn away in a single instant. The wedding was breathtaking. My son, Ethan Hayes, 32 years old, looked happier than I had seen him in years as he waited for his bride, Lauren Miller, to walk down the aisle. The Miller estate sat on acres of rolling hills in Virginia, complete with a private chapel that could seat hundreds of guests. Everything shimmered with wealth and careful planning. Lauren wore a dress that must have cost more than most people's yearly salary, and her family beamed with pride. I had chosen a simple navy dress, nothing flashy, and my grandmother's pearls. To most eyes, I was exactly what they expected, a respectable widow keeping her place quietly at the edge of the celebration. That was how I had survived for years, invisible by design. After the ceremony came the reception, overflowing with flowers, music, and champagne. I stood near the back of the ballroom, watching Ethan and Lauren dance their first dance as husband and wife. I thought the evening would pass quietly. I was wrong. Lauren approached me with her parents in tow. Her tone was sweet, but carried the edge of someone eager to show off. "Mom, Dad, I want you to meet Ethan's mother. This is Margaret Hayes." Her father, Charles Miller, turned toward me with polite interest. But then his expression changed. His eyes narrowed, his mouth fell slightly open, and he spoke words that froze the air around us. "Margaret Hayes, aren't you the woman who sat on the acquisition board 3 years ago? The one who bought my company?" Every conversation nearby seemed to pause. Lauren's face drained of color. Her mother looked sharply at me, and for the first time in years, I felt every eye in the room searching for the truth. I had been invisible, but not anymore. From the outside, my life looked simple, even ordinary. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, drove a 10-year-old sedan, and shopped at the same department store where my neighbors bought their clothes. My furniture was comfortable, but far from luxurious. Anyone visiting me would walk away thinking I lived on a careful budget, stretching a widow's pension as best as I could. That was the point. Over the years, I learned that the easiest way to keep secrets safe was to match people's expectations. If you look like you are just getting by, no one imagines you are quietly building something much larger. I had no interest in diamonds on my wrists or designer handbags on my shoulder. I preferred the freedom of moving through the world without drawing attention. I used to remind myself of a story I once read about Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest men alive, and yet he still lived in the same house he bought decades earlier. His wealth was measured not in his cars or his wardrobe, but in his decisions, in his discipline. That became my model. Even at Ethan's wedding, my pearl necklace wasn't chosen for its value. It had belonged to my grandmother, a reminder of the women before me who survived hardship with quiet strength. My navy dress was carefully selected to be elegant but unremarkable, blending and gave me room to breathe, to think, and to plan. Of course, this disguise had its costs. People often underestimated me. Some even pied me, believing I might need help as I grew older. Lauren herself had once asked me in a casual tone whether I worried about my finances and if Ethan might need to support me someday. I simply smiled and let her believe what she wanted. What none of them knew was that my modest mask was not weakness, it was strategy. And for 15 years, it had served me well until that night when Charles Miller's recognition began to pull the curtain back, threatening to reveal the truth I had worked so hard to conceal. To understand how I ended up at that wedding with the secret fortune, you need to go back more than a decade. My late husband, Richard Hayes, was an engineer like me. We met in our 20s, working long hours at a tech company in Austin. He was brilliant, quiet, and endlessly curious. In 2010, after years of tinkering and testing, Richard developed a power management system that made cell phone batteries last significantly longer without increasing their size. It was a small innovation that solved a massive problem. At first, we thought it would bring in enough money for us to retire a little earlier than expected. Nothing extravagant, but when we sold the patent in 2012, the check that came back was for $25 million. I remember staring at those numbers as if they belonged to someone else. $25 million. It felt like we had stumbled into another universe. That very day, Richard and I made a choice that shaped the rest of our lives. We told Ethan we had received a comfortable payout enough to take care of our needs, but nothing beyond that. We never mentioned the actual figure. He was 24 at the time, fresh out of graduate school, eager to build his own career in marketing. We wanted him to chase his dreams without the shadow of inherited wealth shaping his every step. With the money in hand, Richard and I began to study. We were cautious at first, investing in stable stocks, learning the rhythm of the market. Over time, we grew bolder, branching into growth companies, real estate, and promising neighborhoods, and eventually early-stage technology firms. Richard had a remarkable talent for spotting value where others saw only risk. I balanced his vision with discipline, researching every deal until I understood it inside and out. By 2015, our portfolio had doubled. By 2018, it had multiplied again, reaching 200 million. When Richard passed away in 2020 after a sudden illness, I was left with grief, memories, and a portfolio worth more than $700 million. Carrying on without him was the hardest thing I had ever done. But I continued what we had started, managing every investment with the same patience and care. Today, those careful decisions have grown our fortune to nearly $1 billion. A number so large it feels almost abstract. But behind every dollar is a story of discipline, late nights reading financial reports, and a determination to secure our future. And yet, the world never knew. To Ethan, to our neighbors, to Lauren's family, I was just a widow living modestly. I wanted it that way. What good would come from people seeing me differently? What good would it do Ethan to be judged as the son of a wealthy woman rather than by his own hard work? That was the balance I fought to protect. A balance that now, under the bright lights of the wedding reception, threatened to unravel. When Charles Miller recognized me that night, I could see the shift in his daughter's expression. Lauren had always been polite on the surface, but there was something sharp behind her smiles. Until then, she seemed to view me as a harmless presence in her new life, a woman she could measure and dismiss without effort. But now, her eyes carried something else: curiosity mixed with calculation. Lauren was ambitious. She had studied business at a top school, spent summers working at her father's company, and once expected to inherit the leadership of Miller Industries. That dream vanished the moment I quietly purchased the company through an investment shell years ago. Under professional management, the company had thrived again. But it was no longer tied to the Miller family's direct control. To Lauren, I hadn't just been invisible. I had unknowingly taken her place in the story she thought was hers. Ethan, my son, had always believed in building life on his own terms. He worked long hours, saved carefully, and built a reputation as a marketing manager without ever suspecting that his mother could have financed his world many times over. He thought Lauren admired him for his character and independence. Perhaps she did, but I began to suspect there was more. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Lauren had asked me a few probing questions. Did I worry about retirement? Did I think Ethan might need to support me someday? At the time, I brushed it off as polite concern. Now, I wasn't so sure. Charles's recognition had given her something to chase. I saw the gleam in her eye as she processed the revelation. For someone like Lauren, information was opportunity. And the opportunity she saw was not love or family unity. It was access. That night, I realized my greatest challenge was no longer protecting a fortune from strangers. It was protecting my son from the ambitions of the woman he had just married. A few days after the wedding, Lauren sent Ethan and me an invitation. She had reserved a table at the most exclusive restaurant in the city. The kind of place where the wine list read like a foreign novel and the bill for 3 people could cover a family's monthly rent. Ethan thought it was a gesture of kindness, a way for his new wife to bond with me. I knew better. When we arrived, Lauren was already seated. She wore a tailored suit I recognized from a recent business magazine spread. Her hair perfectly styled, her smile bright but rehearsed. On the table sat a 1,000-bottle of Bordeaux she had ordered in advance. "Margaret, Ethan," she said warmly, standing to greet us. "I wanted to celebrate our new family." The waiter poured the wine, and we made small talk at first, but before long, Lauren opened a folder she had placed beside her plate. Inside were neatly printed documents. Her voice grew confident as if she had practiced the lines in front of a mirror. "I've been thinking a lot about our family's future," she began. "We have a rare opportunity to build something lasting. A foundation managed together that could provide security, privacy, and purpose." Ethan frowned. "A foundation?" "Yes," Lauren continued, her tone steady. "Imagine a family trust that combines our resources. You, me, and Margaret would all serve as trustees with equal votes. It would allow us to coordinate investments, make charitable contributions, and manage wealth across generations." Her words were smooth, but the intention was clear. She wasn't talking about philanthropy or legacy. She was talking about control. I let her finish without interrupting, swirling the wine in my glass as if this were nothing more than polite conversation. Ethan looked uncertain, caught between his loyalty to his wife and his respect for me. When Lauren paused, waiting for my response, I simply smiled. "That's an ambitious idea, dear," I said, "though perhaps a bit much for a casual family lunch, don't you think?" Her smile tightened. She wanted me to bite, to argue, to reveal something. Instead, I gave her nothing. But inside, I felt the first spark of a battle being lit. If Lauren thought she could trap me at a lunch table, she was about to learn I had been playing a much longer, more complex game than she could imagine. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lauren's proposal had been too polished, too rehearsed. It wasn't a spontaneous idea shared over lunch. It was a plan. Carefully prepared. And if she had gone to the trouble of drafting documents, then she had already taken steps behind the scenes. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. The next morning, I called James Porter, my longtime financial advisor. James had guided Richard and me through countless investments over the years. If there was anyone I trusted to dig into the Miller family's background, it was him. Margaret, James said, when I explained the situation, what you're describing sounds less like family planning and more like a financial takeover. If she's making moves this early, you need to be cautious. Within a week, James had a report ready. It was thicker than I expected, filled with numbers, charts, and correspondence. As I read through it, the picture became clear. The Miller family's lifestyle was built on a shaky foundation. Their estate was mortgaged up to 80% of its value. Their investment accounts had been drained to maintain appearances. Most of Charles Miller's income came from consulting contracts quietly arranged by the new management of his former company connections I had set in motion when I bought it. In other words, the family's comfort had been sustained by me all along, though they never realized it. But there was more. Lauren herself had opened several new lines of credit in the past month. The money had gone toward paying a private investigator, one who specialized in tracking corporate assets and unmasking anonymous investors. She had also made discreet inquiries with the law firm that handled estate disputes and family trusts. I closed the folder slowly. Lauren wasn't just curious. She was building a case. A case against me. What she didn't know was that I had built my life on preparation. And if she wanted to treat this like a chess game, she was already several moves behind. It didn't take long for Lauren to push the situation to the next level. 2 weeks after the wedding, Ethan told me we had been invited to a family meeting at her parents' office downtown. The invitation sounded polite, but the undertone was clear. This wasn't a dinner or a chat over coffee. This was a negotiation. When I arrived, the room was set like a boardroom from a corporate drama. A polished oak table, bottled water lined neatly in front of each chair, and folders stacked in the center. Lauren sat beside Ethan, her posture confident, while her parents, Charles and Diane Miller, took seats across from me. A man in a sharp gray suit introduced himself as Mark Benson, their attorney. Mark cleared his throat and spoke first. Mrs. Hayes, thank you for coming. We're here today to discuss a financial structure that ensures fairness and transparency for everyone in this family. Lauren slid a folder toward me. It's a proposal, she said smoothly. A family trust. We believe $15 million would be an appropriate initial contribution from you. With equal voting rights among the trustees, myself, Ethan, and you, we could guide investments in charitable giving together. I didn't even open the folder. 15 million, I repeated as though tasting the words. Ethan looked overwhelmed, shifting in his chair. Lauren, maybe this is moving too fast. Lauren ignored him. This isn't about speed. It's about vision. Our family could build something extraordinary if we start now. I leaned back, folding my hands calmly. Lauren, before we move forward, I think there are some other documents we should consider. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder of my own, one James had prepared. I placed it on the table and slid it toward her. Her confident expression faltered. Inside were copies of her recent credit lines, her payments to a private investigator, and her inquiries with an estate law firm. I let the silence settle before speaking again. You've been busy, I said quietly, investigating me, preparing legal strategies, borrowing money you expect to pay back once you gain access to mine. Ethan's face drained of color as he turned toward his wife. Lauren, is this true? Lauren stammered. I was only trying to understand what was really happening with the family's finances. I looked at each of them in turn. You wanted transparency. Here it is. I know about your debts, your investigations, and your intentions. If you believe this meeting gives you leverage, you're mistaken. Because this isn't your boardroom. It's mine. The silence after my words was heavy. For a long moment, no one moved. Ethan sat frozen between us, his eyes shifting from his wife to me. Lauren's polished confidence had cracked. Her parents avoided my gaze. Their attorney shuffled papers, but said nothing. I leaned forward, my voice calm but steady. This ends one of two ways. Either you withdraw every investigation, every legal complaint, and every attempt to meddle in my affairs, or we let this escalate. And believe me, you don't want to see how far I'm willing to go. Lauren opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. In return for your silence, I'll give you $5 million. One payment, no strings. After that, you will never contact me or my son again. Ethan blinked. Mom, $5 million. You can't be serious. I am, I said firmly. This isn't about generosity. It's about clarity. If Lauren married you for love, then she won't care about money. If she married you for wealth, then she'll take the deal. Either way, you'll finally have your answer. Lauren's attorney leaned toward her, whispering urgently. She glanced at him, then at her parents, who were already calculating behind their composed expressions. 5 million, she repeated slowly, as if weighing the words on her tongue. Yes, I said. 5 million now or nothing later. The choice is yours. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner. In that silence, I saw it clearly. The battle lines had been drawn, and I had just placed an ultimatum on the table that would decide not only my future, but my son's as well. The following days passed in tense silence. Ethan stayed in his apartment, answering my calls with short sentences, clearly torn between loyalty and confusion. Lauren, on the other hand, vanished from sight. When she finally resurfaced, it was through her attorney. She had accepted my offer. $5 million transferred into an account of her choosing in exchange for permanent separation from our lives. The paperwork was signed swiftly, too swiftly, almost as if she had been waiting for this exact outcome. Ethan filed for divorce soon after citing irreconcilable differences. His face looked older, lined with disappointment and betrayal. He admitted he had seen signs but never wanted to believe them. Now he couldn't unsee. For weeks, Ethan avoided me. He needed space, he said, to process the truth not only about his wife, but about me. 15 years of silence weighed on him. He confessed that part of his anger wasn't only about Lauren. It was about discovering that his entire life had been built beside a secret I had kept hidden. I let him speak without defending myself. Sometimes silence is the only answer a parent can give because explanations can sound like excuses. I wanted Ethan to know I hadn't lied out of distrust. I had hidden the truth to give him freedom. Little by little, he began to understand. One evening, he called and said, "Mom, I think I get it now. You didn't want me to inherit comfort. You wanted me to inherit resilience." His words felt like sunlight breaking through after a storm. The wound wasn't healed. Not yet, but there was hope. Lauren was gone, and the marriage was over. But for the first time in a long time, Ethan and I were beginning to rebuild what mattered most, our trust. Months passed and life slowly began to take shape again. I sold the apartment where Richard and I had lived for decades. It was filled with memories, both beautiful and painful. But it also carried the weight of secrets. I needed a fresh start. I moved to Santa Fe, a place that had always pulled at my heart with its art, its desert skies, and its quiet rhythm of life. There, no one knew me as the mysterious investor or the wealthy widow. I was simply Margaret, a woman in her 60s who liked to walk through the farmer's market and talk to local artists. I also started something new, the Richard Fund, named in honor of my late husband. It provided scholarships for young engineers from working-class families who dreamed of patenting their ideas but lacked the means. Watching these students present their projects full of hope and determination gave me more satisfaction than any profit margin ever had. For once, my money wasn't just numbers on a page. It was possibility made real in someone else's hands. Ethan and I needed time to heal, but slowly we found our way back. There were dinners marked by silence and moments when old frustrations surfaced. But then came a turning point. Ethan introduced me to someone new. Her name was Claire, a teacher with kind eyes and a laugh that filled a room. When he told her his mother lived in a modest apartment and drove an old sedan, she smiled and said, "She sounds like a woman who knows her priorities." In that instant, I knew my son had finally found what he deserved. That Christmas, for the first time in years, my table was filled with genuine laughter. No hidden agendas, no comparisons, no masks, just family cocoa and carols sung slightly off-key. Looking back, I realized something important. The greatest wealth wasn't the $1 billion I managed or the companies I invested in. It was the ability to choose peace, to live authentically, and to leave a legacy of integrity. Real revenge wasn't destroying Lauren or her ambitions. Real revenge was thriving without her shadow. And so I chose to step out of invisibility, not by flaunting riches, but by embracing a life where my value was measured not in dollars, but in presence.